Um,
Starting it right now.
that's okay. Is Blair on yet or no? Okay. All right.
We'll just
Do we
wait a
have some
second
people?
for Blair to get.
Say that one more time.
Oh, I said we'll just wait a second for Blair to get on.
Okay. I'm not familiar with this platform.
And we are live right now. Okay, it does say Blair says she's here. Okay, cool. Thank you for joining us today for the discussion on designing all-ability bikeways. We thank Blair Tomten of Salt Lake County Advisory Committee and Avenue Consultants, and Amanda King, a teacher at Duchesne High School, for joining us here today for this conversation. Please note the commenter guidelines that have been pasted in the session chat. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we will discuss in the last portion of our session today after the speakers have finished their presentations. And Blair Tomten will start us off now. It looks like Blair is having some issues, so it might take just a second.
Are we there? Can you hear me? We're good. Oh my gosh. Sorry, I hit the deny button for microphone and speaker, so that was a lot of panic all of a sudden, so apologize for that. Okay. I even tested this. We tested. So okay. I think we are up and running. Is that a yes from everybody? Okay, perfect. Okay, so we are going to be talking about all ages and abilities. Specifically with Manda being here, I wanted to kind of talk about some of the things that she and I have talked about that she's run into when she's been out and biking. So kind of focusing on all abilities biking today. I'm sure most of you have seen this FHWA bike selection guide graphic that talks about our interested but concerned, somewhat confident, and highly confident users. As you can see, all of these bike riders are upright. None of them are in a hand cycling position. They're all, able-bodied people. And I think that's, when we think about biking, we only think about people riding bikes like this. We've come from the point where we discuss people wearing spandex, the highly confident, the guy that's in the racing position, that we used to design a lot of our bikeways for that. Now we're looking at all ages and abilities. So we're talking from kids to seniors. And when we talk all abilities, we're talking from usually this, which is the interested but concerned and somewhat confident. But, like I said, we're not talking about the abilities of the different types of cyclists. So when we talk about accessibility usually comes out in the form of blind people, of people in wheelchairs. We don't talk about people riding hand bikes. And, you know, even in the graphic down below, you see somebody pushing in a wheelchair, somebody in a wheelchair, blind with a dog, blind with a cane, struggling to walk, and then immediately into bikes, cars, and buses. So when it comes to design, there isn't a lot of guidance out there right now to really consider the people with disabilities in America. So one of the things Amanda and I talked about, which she'll be showing you a little bit later, is the issue that she's had with some of the rail crossings with the trails here in Utah when she's out biking and trying to get through them. I've witnessed some issues with these. Also with Heidi Goodhart, we were up at after the Golden Spoke ride and trying to catch Front Runner to come home, and she couldn't get her cargo bike through the chicanes that are installed. So it doesn't only impact people with disabilities, it's impacting different types of bike. The other thing is some of those gates that they install on the trails so that vehicles don't drive down them, the spacing of them can be off. I've also watched a woman hit one of those gates so hard that she got knocked to the ground, and because that was the only way through, we couldn't move her and nobody could get through that area. So what I'm talking about is some of these types of things, you know, where you see how they've viewed the crossing or they've, you know, created a different pathway. This is from the FHWA Highway Rail Crossing Handbook, 3rd edition, which might be, some of these resources might be a little bit old, but there's still stuff that people are using. As you can see, this creates crossings at an angle. Now, there's a lot of issues with creating an angled crossing, especially when there was an opportunity to create a 90-degree crossing. The closer you are to 90, the easier it is for people with wheels to get across that area. So creating this, also as a blind person, that bottom illustration, if you were to come out that bottom and just walk straight across, you walk straight across into a fence. So I don't like these kind of crossings. I prefer them to be as straight across the tracks as you can possibly get. Oops. Okay, so this is on, I believe it's Sago Lily and the Murdoch Trail. And this is just a screenshot from Google Earth. I was hoping to get out there. But as you can see, coming from the north, you've got the trail, you've got some bollards, you've got fencing, and then you come down and then there's a fence across the sidewalk. So if you want to continue on the trail, I'm not actually quite sure how you would even get to the trail besides going up to 2 intersections, which there are no signalized intersections in the proximate area. But you end up having to zigzag back and forth across the tracks to be able to get over to one of these areas. Now, Amanda's had a hard time getting her bike through these. So it's, like I said, I really wanted to ride through this. I don't even know how I would get my regular road bike through this without being able to get off and get around it. And the standard is a 5-foot minimum space to be able to get around. So one of the things here's just from a UTA crossing. As you can see, it's kind of only a one-sided chicane and gating system with the black fence. But as you can see on the edge there, that people have, you know, they've kind of cut through and they've worn down the pavements or the grass up in the corner. This at least allows somebody with a larger bike to use that grass space to make a wider turn, but it's still an unpaved area. So if that's wet or muddy, somebody's having to go through the mud to be able to get around and get across. The picture on the lower left shows a different type of fencing that, you know, once again, is still creating that space. So I just ended up walking through this area just as a walking person, just to experience, to show you kind of how it's expected. This seems like it's a little bit wider. And the thing is if you're pushing your bike, it's not such a big deal. But if you're unable to get off your bike to push it, you're having to roll through these areas. So now we're going a little bit farther back in time, 2012, but as for now, this is the bike guide until the new one comes out, which I keep on hearing is actually even a little bit farther away than we keep on hoping. So when we talk about the different types of bicycle dimensions, it says right here in this figure, typical bicycle dimensions. They do show a recumbent bike, but it's, once again, it's only regular bikes. And then we start talking about the key dimensions. They talk about physical width, physical length, operating width, operating height. And it's not until you get to the second page where you see a hand bicyclist. And the only dimension they have is the eye height. Now, when I spoke with Amanda, she measured her wheelchair and her bike and realized that it's only 25, or it is 25 inches wide. Now, that doesn't sound like much, but when you only have 5 feet to get around something, or sometimes 4, and plus the additional length, you're trying to navigate that and get that to shim. It doesn't have its turning radius. What I would love to see is to have a better understanding of what turning radiuses are for bikes in these spaces. We talk about 2-stage turn boxes where you put a bike in it and it's supposed to turn 90 degrees. Now, if you're in a regular bike, you can get up, you can kind of do a 90-degree turn, or you can kind of swing wide, but that presents some safety issues. So this is a bike crossing that we have designed on a project. It's still in design right now, but it's a 12-foot rail or 12-foot trail coming up to a rail crossing. Apologize for the blurry image in the background, but what this shows is that we've created we've still prevented somebody coming up the trail from going directly into the tracks. But what we've done is we've created a chicane that allows somebody to make a gentle movement, to be able to look left and to be able to look to the right, so that they're coming into it to be able to cross at 90 degrees, so that we're hopefully not restricting people with trailers, people on hand bikes, people with cargo bikes from getting through this safely and efficiently. So one of the next things I kind of want to talk about, now we talked about rail crossings a little bit, is push buttons. There's a lot of different push buttons in different places. Now, this happens to be on 21st South and 8th East and was installed specifically for bike crossings. But a lot of times we come up with trail crossings, and if this was in a previous life, if you needed to get across this intersection and were not comfortable at just darting across and you had to get over to the signal pole that is over on the right picture, that you would have to get out of the bikeway, you'd have to come up onto the ped ramp, you'd have to get there, you have to turn around, you push the button and get going. I'm not saying it's in this specific situation since this was a new installation of crossing, but in other locations. So Amanda has a hard time getting into these spaces. So creating a push button in line with the bikeway helps people get across the intersections. Here's another location. I like this push button a lot better. It's a lot closer to the edge of the bikeway. It's easy to access. It's perfectly in line with where you need to go. It gives you a little, if you're biking, it gives you a spot to put your foot on there. You're out of the way. I think it's a good thing. So here's a picture I took on a bike ride was of this push button, and UDOT now has standards for how to handle pedestrian facilities during construction. So pedestrian facility like this shouldn't be an issue, but if you're somebody that's uncomfortable with crossing and this was on a bike trail, do you feel comfortable? Would you be able to get over there to be able to get that button pushed and then to get back to that space in time to get across? So I guess before I hand this off to Amanda, is one of the things we want to talk about is that there are some minor guidelines showing how these things are supposed to be set up, but there's not a huge amount of design guidance for how to really design for bikeways in these situations. And so, being able to go out and experience these and to be able to ride with Amanda and to hear what she has to say is that hopefully you can kind of take some of those things into your consideration when you're planning and designing, that you can use those guidelines as guidance and use your engineering judgments or your experience to provide something that's going to be safe and friendly and fun. So back to my awesome screenshots. Amanda.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Blair. Let me get my screen all set up. Okay, so I kind of wanted to show some things about myself. So I've been in a wheelchair my whole life. This is little tiny Amanda. I think it was like 3 or 4 in this picture. So I've always just been in a wheelchair. I've been a wheelchair user. This is the bike that I have specifically. I sit long ways. My cute little dog chilling in the back in the basket. This is what I've ridden around with in the Salt Lake area. I've had this bike for a while. This is a bike that you lean to turn. It's an older design, but I really love it. And I wanted to show this video. So this is one of the chicanes, and I was talking on it, but it's just trying to get through these things is really, really difficult. One, because my bike's turning radius is really sad, and then the other is that it's such a long bike. And so it was a lot of points to be able to get through this. So there's one, and then I gotta back up and readjust, and then because you don't want to go too far. And so sometimes with adaptive cycling, we just have a little bit different shape than some other people. And so these are things that aren't necessarily as thought about. But like there's been times when I'm in a bike lane and on the side of the road it kind of tapers off a little bit, and those are hard because I have to lean like this while I bike. But there's some really useful and really good trails that I've seen that are wide enough, that are flat. Paved trails are much better than gravel trails, at least for road bikes. And then we can get into mountain biking, which is a totally different thing. But the biggest thing is that there's a lot of things that, as an adaptive cyclist, that maybe people who just cycle standing up don't think about as much. Turning radius is one. There's times when the turn is too sharp, and so I have to kind of cut it on the grass a little bit. And then also too, as I've worked with people with disabilities, the changing of lighting can be difficult when you're going in a tunnel. Some of those underpasses are really hard because all of a sudden it's dark and then light. And so that's some people transition between that a lot slower. There's a few curves that are really difficult sometimes out of an underpass to make. And then also it's a blind curve, so you can't see it. The Jordan River Trail has a few of those that are absolutely terrifying. But as you know, an adaptive cyclist, we just want to be able to get out and recreate as much as we can. And so here you can see that I finally made it through. But now I have to still adjust again to get back onto the trail. And so when it's just me, I just actually cut across the street. It's really illegal and not probably what I should be doing, but I have a flag that I do have up high so that I can get through, people can see me. But when I see gates like this, it's a lot easier to be able to navigate around, or even when they're separated like this, it can be a little bit risky, but it's still much better than trying to get through one of those chicanes. And so what I want to just talk about really quick is things to think about when you're designing for adaptive riders, and really all abilities, because there's some people that sit low, some people that sit high, there's ones that even like are laying on their backs, and so there's a whole bunch of different stuff. And this image, this is one of my favorite examples, these 3 people trying to watch a baseball game. And so when they're treated equally and they're all given the same resource, 2 of them can now see and 1 of them just can't see because you see the different heights. Here, this is equity, and so that way the people who need a little bit more of an adaptive thing have it there with them. And so you see that now they all have the opportunity to watch over the fence. But my favorite is this 3rd image, because instead of just trying to give people more of something, you just change the fence. So no matter how tall you are, you can still look through it, and the fence is still there acting as, a break between the field and not in the field. And so this is able to get rid of a ton of different problems all at once, instead of having to address every individual problem. And so like Blair said, it's really good to be able to go out and to talk to people and to ride to see what can be some solutions and to try to come up with something that not only is going to work for just this group or just that group, but can really help all around and get rid of a lot of solutions or a lot of problems. I have seen even in the comments already that a lot of people are having troubles with these gates. I'm kind of glad it's not just me. And so, yeah, and if you guys ever have any questions or you ever want to contact me, I go riding out with you. I live in Duchesne, so I'm not in Salt Lake all the time, but I also am still exploring trails and, coming across different things. And so if you ever have any questions or anything, please feel free to contact me. All right. I'm going to go ahead and exit out of that. And I think we are
Great.
on
And
to
if
our
you have
questions.
yeah, if you have questions, please put them into the chat. And I have a couple of questions for Blair and Amanda as we go forward. And I just wanted to start with a question for Blair. Blair, what are some of the ways other planners can begin to implement some of these ideas to develop all ability bikeways?
Yeah, kind of what I was saying was, using the flexibility within the design, because we are in the stage where things are still in a guidance document and not necessarily a standard. When, looking at like the UDOT rail crossing standards, when they say 5-foot minimum, like that's not, you do not have to do the minimum. You can find ways to make that, crossing better. The other thing is that we are, oh, I've totally blanked. But I'm seeing people are having a hard time hearing. Are you having a hard time hearing me or just everybody in general?
I think it's mostly Chris is what I'm seeing.
Okay. But I guess the other thing is we, especially when we're planning this stuff, is that to get that 90-degree crossing, sometimes the road or the railroad is at a skew, and trying to get that 90% or 90-degree crossing, I've seen a study that goes down to at least 60% or 60 degrees. That still is pretty safe, but getting that 90-degree crossing is a little tough sometimes, especially with the limited right-of-way. And I know rail crossings are tough because there's a lot of things that are happening there, but trying to have enough space to be able to get people across. When we design, we would never say, oh, you can't, on an interstate project, oh, we're not going to design for WB 67, which is, the big trucks. We design for all the vehicles on the road, so let's design for all the vehicles, all the bikes on the bikeway.
Great, thank you. Next question, another question for Blair. A lot of Utah is older and more established. How do we squeeze in better bicycle facilities when space is already so limited?
There's always ways. There's, depending on the type of the roadway, reducing some of the travel lane width, improving these crossings so that they're just safer. We understand we can't get all of the things in all of the space, but we can find ways to make things fit. I guess you can't have it all, even though I always want it all, but, we are able to do the best you can do within the space that you have and have that hard conversation about taking some of those other things. Free on-street parking is something that should be immediately off the table as far as like when you need to provide for pedestrians and people biking. Sorry, should be on the table. You should, that's an easy one. Like, we want to get, roads are for transportation. We're talking about active transportation. So.
Great, thank you. Amanda, what are some common misconceptions people have about adaptive cycling, and how can we combat these misconceptions and communicate more effectively to advocate for more accessible cycling facilities?
So I think some of the common misconceptions for cycling with adaptive cyclers is that they're only in this one little area. Just like Blair showed earlier, that there's additional types of bike riders, with the cargo bikes and the trailers, even inaccessible, there's multiple kinds. We've got recumbent bikes, laying down bikes, sitting up like in a chair style. And so everyone also has different ability levels. There's some riders out there who just to have them get a mile is really impressive and good. And then there's some riders out there who their goal for the day is 20 miles or more. I know some cyclists that they do 100, and they're adaptive cyclists that will go and do 100-mile rides every once in a while. I'm wanting to get to that. I'm not quite there myself. But some of the hardest things with facilities, though, honestly, is bathrooms. Because even if you're just out cycling and you have to go to the bathroom, fitting a bike into a bathroom is hard, and you can't really get out of your bike to go into the bathroom. Um, and so some water fill stations can be a little difficult as well. I like one on the Provo River Trail. It's just a spout or a spigot, but then I can go up where I'm at and fill up my water bottle really easily. Because when I sit low, I can't really get to a drinking fountain. And so typically I have to put everything, pack a lot of water. So those are, I think, bathrooms, just trying to be a little bit more maybe cognizant. That's a hard one, but being able to think about that and water. And then Blair also mentioned push buttons, because when they're far away from the trail, I can't really like turn and then quickly come back. So those are something that are really helpful.
I just want to address Mike West made a good comment, and reallocating the space on the street. A lot of times we have, actually Utah has really huge wide roads. We're in a unique situation where being old, parts of Utah being older, well, it's actually not a problem. We have so much space. It's just trying to get everybody comfortable with taking some of that space back and using it for new situations. So first, an easy thing is, getting rid of some of the on-street parking or shifting it over, narrowing the lanes, striping in some bike lanes on lower speed roads. When the speeds start to increase, finding the way to provide that protection to be able to actually protect that bike lane, not with just flexi posts, but with a concrete curb, some B5 back to back if you're on a UDOT facility. It's and then when the opportunity comes that you're reconstructing the street, first the one is with like a mill-in overlay or a slurry seal. It's easy time to redo your striping. And then when you finally have the opportunity to reconstruct, get out there and like talk about it and ask what people want and look at those connections and see where those things can be done.
Amanda, what would you hope that city planners, officials, and engineers take from this conversation?
Yeah, so for those who couldn't hear, the question is, what would I hope that city planners, officials, and engineers take from this conversation? The biggest thing is just being able to think about more people when, oops, this is not what I wanted. Sorry, hold on a sec. There we go. To think about all the different possibilities and types of bikes that are coming out and going on these different trails. Because for some people, they use this to get around to and from work. Some people use these trails just to recreate, and to think about not only the different types of bikes, but the different users, and just something that how we're able to design something that's useful for everyone instead of having to nitpick all these little things, but really making a design. In teaching, we call it differentiation. That it just allows everyone the most of their experience that they're having on the bike trails.
Great, thank you. Some of the viewers have made comments about UTA's responsibility in managing the railroad crossings and UTA being unresponsive to requests for improvements. What is their responsibility on this issue, and are there any limitations to reconstructing these crossings because of UTA guidelines? Maybe that's a question for Blair.
Chris, I want to let you know that you are like almost 100% impossible to hear.
I don't know what's going on, but
I don't.
Can you?
But it's something about a UTA crossing, about who's responsible for them.
Yeah, who's responsible, and what can we do to take care of some of those issues?
As planners and designers, we can provide better design and, put that out there in that design. So then when you're going to that 30, 60, 90% review meeting, when as a planner, as you're doing concepts, start talking about those conversations early. The more design guidance we start to have, the more we're going to start to see that these are not going to work for everybody. And what I've learned is the more these topics keep on coming up, like in here at the summit and other things, is that more people are talking about it, and so the conversations are being had. So it's not like it's just one person coming to a meeting and say, I don't like this. It's like, hey, what can we do to make this better?
Great. And Blair, you showed some photos of push button heights. Is there kind of an ideal height for both upright and adaptive cyclists? Is there like a sweet spot?
I don't know for the adaptive. And now, so Amanda and I were going to go riding last week, and I was hoping to like take videos and like measurements because I carry a tape measure with me because I'm crazy. But I wanted to kind of see, experience how she was experiencing it as much as I could and take some of those measurements because there isn't a lot of great guidance as to what that height is. The reason I had so many pictures of push button height is because we were installing push buttons on a project, and I went around Salt Lake City and was measuring all the different heights to see, like, because there's like I said, there's push buttons that I really like because of the placement, and I was like, what is this placement? And I think they just end up where they end up. But we can start figuring that out and finding like the right place that works, not because there's guidance to tell you, but just we can still figure that out. We don't have to just go with whatever.
It doesn't look like we have any other questions unless somebody else wants to put a question in the chat.
Oh, I love that Andrew Guevara is on. She is UDOT signals engineer. And so, yeah, there isn't a standard for bike push buttons. It's only for ADA for PEDs. But that's, when you're sitting up on your bike and you're trying not to get off it, you don't want to be leaning down. You don't want to be reaching up. Like there is definitely a kind of a range of a sweet spot that it seems like that 48 inches off the ground seems to be pretty nice, which some of the guys when I was measuring, they like to hit it with their elbow, because of COVID last year, or, you want it kind of over, so that you don't want to be leaning. And one of the things was, Amanda, you were talking about your leaning on the bikes. A lot of the drop-offs on the edges of of the bike trails kind of washes away. That's something as planners and engineers we can't really do much about with that material washing away. But, providing enough of a shoulder, maybe it's a 10-to-1 slope or something off that edge so that the material doesn't wash away so quickly, that shouldering is flush with the edge of pavement.
One question that I had about this is, I've heard that maybe one of the issues is just the cost of sort of creating an accessible system. Do you have any thoughts on that? Does it really cost more? Are there ways to do it that are cost effective?
A whole system? Sorry, I was reading comments and listening, so I wasn't maybe not multitasking.
Sorry, I was just asking, is there a cost effective way to make our system more accessible?
Yeah, design it right the first time. Consider the users, early on. And I think that's what we've done, some pretty good planning activities where we're getting to go out with adaptive cyclists. We're going out with blind group, with people that are hearing impaired, that are different types of users, facilities, so that you're experiencing it early on in the project so that you can design for that. Designing as much as you can to be as accessible for everybody. It's going to accommodate the most amount of users from now and into the future. Even little robots that want to be on the streets.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that wraps up this session. Thanks for all your questions and comments. And sorry for the mic issues.
And sorry for my technological delay as well.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you guys for your questions and everything. So, and I put my email in the chat if anyone has some more questions or thinks of anything else, or just wants to go out for a ride sometime.
Yes, Amanda and I will be going for a ride here in the near future when it's nice, and so I can go learn.
Mhm.